The next day, when for the 10th time we had set a wedding date, Luke Hayes once again stepped past me to kiss another woman. He handed a blazing red rose to Hazel Locke, the girl who had just stepped down from the stage, his princess. He said that in this lifetime he would be the sole bearer of flowers for her alone. I stood quietly on the outskirts of the cheering crowd, then silently turned around and left without ever looking back. An engagement that had lasted 5 years finally ended in a single moment that made me completely lose all hope. That night, I took the wedding invitation and the jade bracelet that had been prepared since our engagement 5 years ago and went to see Luke. "Let's cancel the engagement," I said, my voice calm and completely devoid of emotion. Luke looked at me for a long time with those beautiful eyes of his. After a while, he leaned lazily against the sofa, narrowed his eyes at me, and said in a weary tone, "Chloe, what kind of joke are you playing?" I shook my head. "I'm serious." As if to prove that this was the result of careful and mature consideration, I added, "I've thought about this for many years before making this decision." The final glow of sunset fell across the sofa, making Luke's expression grow even darker. After a moment, he nodded and stood up, his face indifferent. "Suit yourself. As for that jade bracelet from back then, it belongs to you. Take it with you." I said nothing, walked past him into the study, saw the wedding invitation that had yellowed with time, picked up the jade bracelet we had exchanged that year, took a deep breath, then stood up and left. Luke Hayes and I had been together for 10 years. We should have gotten married 5 years ago, but ever since Hazel Locke appeared, the wedding had been postponed again and again. Over the past 5 years, I had lost count of how many times I wanted to let go, only to hesitate and turn back. But this time was different. From today onward, between Luke Hayes and me, there would no longer be any relationship at all. After leaving the study, I unexpectedly saw Luke still standing in the living room. He had clearly left earlier, yet he had come back and was waiting for me. I walked past him, intending to ignore him and leave, but Luke stopped me. He frowned and looked at me. "Chloe, if this is because of what happened today, then you've misunderstood." I listened to him speak in a perfectly proper, self-righteous manner, as if he had done nothing wrong at all, and I didn't even bother to lift my head. "I misunderstood?" This morning he told Hazel that in this lifetime he would only be her messenger of flowers. Before that, he used his status to pressure others into helping Hazel steal my performance opportunity. And before that, because he wanted Hazel to win a game, he kissed her right in front of me. Were all of these things misunderstandings too? Faced with Luke's attempt at reconciliation, his tone still lofty and condescending as ever, for the first time I did not respond. All these years I had always been the one to back down first. Every time we argued, as long as he was willing to speak first, I would obediently return to him. But from now on, that would no longer happen. We were finished. The next morning, I went to the dance troupe for basic training and ran into Hazel backstage. She stood there, elegant and composed, raising her voice as she lectured several junior dancers who had just entered the profession. When she saw me walking past, Hazel lifted her hand to block me, her face openly provocative. In the past, I would have listened to Luke, swallowed my pride, politely greeted her, or silently stepped aside. But now, things were different. I swung my arm and slapped hard against her slender arm. Hazel had not expected me to actually strike her so forcefully. She cried out in pain, pulled her arm back, then immediately rushed forward and shoved my shoulder, shouting angrily, "Chloe, have you lost your mind? Do you even know who I am?" I stood my ground and looked at her calmly. "Of course I do. The young lady of the Hayes family, the darling of the entire dance troupe. 5 years ago, when Luke went to sponsor an orphanage, he happened to meet Hazel, who was visiting the place where she herself had grown up. At that time, the company needed to build a positive public image, so Luke acknowledged Hazel as his adopted younger sister and even brought her home to take care of her. It was just that, at some point, that so-called image quietly turned into unconditional indulgence. From that point on, our wedding kept being postponed again and again, and Hazel Locke's affairs gradually became the #1 priority in his life. That was the first time Luke Hayes ever broke a promise to me, and it was also because of her. I remember it was my birthday. His personal driver had once quietly told me that Luke originally planned to propose to me that day. Unfortunately, Luke was the kind of man who was sincere but painfully straightforward. I didn't want to begin my married life in such an unromantic setting, so that evening, I was the one who took the initiative to reserve a table at the restaurant with the most beautiful sunset view in the city. I sat at the center of that romantic scene, surrounded by fresh flowers and applause. In my hand was a Western-style dinner knife, gently cutting into the exquisitely decorated small cake. Inside it, a ring lay quietly hidden between the sweet layers of cream and the soft candlelight. I was so happy I felt like I was going crazy, until the very next second, Hazel walked in. She said softly, "Brother, I think I have a fever." The moment he saw her, Luke did not hesitate at all. He stopped what he was doing, turned around, and walked straight toward her. The smile on my face froze instantly. Before I could even ask, "What are you doing?" his cold gaze forced the words back down my throat and turned them into something else. "Let's take her to the hospital together in a bit, okay?" He frowned, looked at the ring as if weighing something, but in the end still said cruelly, "Chloe, can you be a little more understanding? Hazel is still young. What if a high fever leaves after effects?" Perhaps a woman's intuition really is terrifyingly sharp. That day, as I watched his figure shielding Hazel and leaving, I suddenly saw the truth with absolute clarity. Luke Hayes had never truly belonged to me, yet no matter how clear that intuition was, I had still fallen for him again and again, been moved again and again, and loved him again and again without sparing myself. How many times had Luke abandoned me because of Hazel? So many that I could no longer even remember. Just then, Hazel's voice, sharp as a blade, cut through the space on the upper floor. "You knew all along, yet you still dared," I snapped back to my senses and calmly interrupted her. "What does she have to do with me?" In the past, Luke not only always protected Hazel, he also forced me to give in to her. It was precisely my unconditional tolerance that had fueled the aggressive arrogance in her eyes. More than once, she had taken my performance opportunities, my dance costumes, my teacher's favor, and even my fiancé. I no longer wanted to revisit everything she had stolen from me in the past, but from now on, I would not yield to her even one more time. "Luke Hayes and I have already canceled our engagement." Hazel froze, her eyes widening as if she could not understand what I was saying. "What? What did you say?" In her gaze, I saw shock and a trace of joy that was hard to conceal. After all, Luke Hayes was rich, powerful, handsome, and the owner of a publicly listed company. What kind of fool would willingly let go of a man like that? But I was willing to use that foolishness in exchange for a sincere love. I did not answer her. My silence and composure fell squarely into Hazel's eyes. Seeing that I did not look like I was putting on an act, her face immediately lit up. "Really? You truly left him?" I was no longer pierced by that excited look. I simply looked at her calmly and replied, "Yes, he and I are over. You don't need to call him brother anymore either." As soon as I finished speaking, Hazel immediately stripped off her dance costume, tossed it to a junior dancer beside her, and hurried away. I knew she was definitely going to look for Luke Hayes. Several girls from the dance troupe looked at me cautiously. "Senior sister, are you okay?" I gently shook my head and forced a faint smile. "I'm fine." I trained all morning in the quiet practice room until my clothes were soaked with sweat, and I was so out of breath that I dragged myself toward the backstage area. A fellow dancer from the troupe walked over from the nearby table and handed me a cup of water. I accepted it gratefully and nodded my thanks, just in time to see her scrolling on her phone and muttering, "Hazel is in love. Why does this man look so familiar?" I froze instinctively, took my phone out of my pocket, and opened Hazel's social media page. The photo that appeared showed her and Luke Hayes holding hands at an orphanage. The caption below read, "You and I walked for so many years, and finally we can walk side by side." The post was dated December 7th. December 7th, exactly the day they had met years ago. I pressed my lips together and looked at the beads of sweat on my forehead, suddenly no longer wanting to wipe them away. On the table sat a framed photo of Luke Hayes in a mascot costume, throwing me a birthday party, still placed neatly under the glass. I reached out without hesitation, took the frame down, stood up, and walked straight to the paper shredder. The photo was swallowed bit by bit, crushed into fragments, cleanly erased without a trace. I returned to the table, lifted the cup, and drank the water in one go. By afternoon, I dragged myself out of the dance troupe, utterly exhausted. The familiar ringtone sounded. I hesitated for a full half-minute before taking the phone out of my pocket. A hollow ache mixed with resentment surged up in my chest. My mother's voice came through the line. "Chloe, you and Luke, when are you?" I cut her off, my voice hoarse but firm. "We've canceled the engagement." After listening to everything I said, my mother immediately exploded in anger over the phone. "What are you thinking? You're almost 30 years old. You still dare to call off the engagement? If you cancel it now, who's going to marry you later? And this marriage was discussed and decided by me and your Aunt Hall. She's already had anesthesia for it. We can't do something so dishonorable. You have to go find your aunt yourself and explain everything clearly to her." "I'll go myself," I said, and hung up. Alone, I walked down a road blazing with headlights and streetlights. The entire city glittered with light, yet not a single one of those lights was lit for me. I thought maybe I would always be this lonely. The phone rang again. I tilted my head, glanced at it, and swiped to answer. "Hello, Professor." His voice came through the phone. "Are you going to the advanced class? If you don't go, Hazel will snatch it away. You should go." "Don't worry, Professor. From now on, the opportunities the troupe gives me, I won't yield to her anymore." He started grumbling, half coaxing, half scolding, saying that I had finally come to my senses. I gave a small smile, a bitter taste spreading on my tongue. It wasn't that I'd come to my senses. It was just that I finally understood this. What belongs to me shouldn't be given up, and what doesn't belong to me shouldn't be clung to. The next day, I took a day off work. I had planned to sleep in properly, but early in the morning the phone rang sharply, shattering my unfinished sleep. On the other end of the line, Luke Hayes's icy voice came through, carrying anger and reproach. "Have you lost your mind? How dare you talk about canceling the engagement with my family, Chloe? You're 30 years old already. You're not some 20-something girl who's still naive like Hazel. Before you do anything, can't you think it through a little?" My sleep-clouded mind instantly cleared with each word of his scolding. I called his name and asked him directly, "Luke Hayes, you like Hazel, don't you?" On the other end of the phone line, there was a long stretch of silence. After a long while, only then did he seem to make up his mind and answer me. He said that his feelings for Hazel Locke were nothing more than affection for a younger sister, and that I was the one he should marry. I stared at the ceiling and suddenly realized that the man I had loved for 10 whole years was, in truth, unbearably cowardly. "Luke Hayes," I said slowly, "the first time you abandoned me because of Hazel was on my birthday. That was the day you planned to propose to me, and it was also the very day you chose to leave me for her. The second time was at the dance troupe gathering. Because she said she felt unwell from drinking, you kissed her right in front of me and told me it was just a game. The third time was when you knew perfectly well how much I longed to be on stage, knew that opportunity belonged to me, yet still turned a blind eye, and under the name of an investor, handed it to Hazel instead." Every time I spoke of one incident, my eyes grew a little redder. "Luke Hayes, you like her, yet you still betrayed me. Do you want me to keep going?" The phone responded with a cold, relentless beeping tone. Luke Hayes could not even bring himself to say a single apology. This man was truly weak to the extreme. Not long after that call, Luke Hayes left the city. He went to Heron Province to discuss a business collaboration, and Hazel went with him. I had no intention of paying attention, but Hazel kept posting photos to her story nonstop. Unable to endure it any longer, I blocked the dance troupe's updates and went home. My life gradually returned to a simple, orderly rhythm. In the past, because of Luke Hayes, no matter how busy I was, I would still force myself to cook him a thoughtful lunch, pack it carefully, and deliver it all the way to his company, only to be met with a few indifferent remarks like how it wasn't as good as the food Hazel ordered. Now, that time was enough for me to get a full night's sleep. I no longer had to drag myself through rehearsals exhausted, drink bitter black coffee just to stay awake, or slump over hard wooden chairs to snatch a few minutes of rest. A week later, Luke Hayes returned. Wearing a black plaid coat, standing tall, his hands in his pockets, he blocked my path right outside the dance troupe gate. "Chloe, can we talk?" He took me to the Sunset Restaurant, the place where he had once planned to propose to me. The central seat was the same. The fresh flowers were still there, along with applause and soft violin music. The scene was so familiar that it felt strangely distant. Luke Hayes pushed a pre-cut piece of cake toward me and said hoarsely, "I've thought very seriously about everything you said that day. I can change. From now on, I'll stand on your side." I put the cake into my mouth without responding. He continued, "Before, I failed to draw a clear line between family and lover, between a sister and a fiancée. I'll fix it. Chloe, can you give me one more chance?" To be honest, saying my heart didn't waver at all would have been a lie. So when I looked into his sincere eyes and saw the ring gleaming between the layers of cream, my heart wavered once again. I parted my lips softly. "Okay." The tension on Luke Hayes' face immediately eased, as if a heavy burden had been lifted. But just as he was about to put the ring on my finger, the familiar ringtone sounded beside my ear. Luke Hayes instinctively glanced at me, then leaned slightly to the side and turned his back, quickly dimming the phone screen. Those small movements did not escape my eyes. I knew exactly who was calling, because it was the special ringtone he had once set just for Hazel. Luke Hayes looked at me, guilt flashing briefly in his eyes. I lowered my head, swallowed the bite of cake I had just eaten, then retched it back up without hesitation. In the past, every time he answered Hazel's calls in front of me, he would show a trace of guilt, while I would force myself to be understanding, smile, hail, and say it was fine. Luke Hayes walked calmly on my generosity, trampling over my boundaries again and again, and now he was still the same. "I'll just take the call for a moment, Chloe. If Hazel is calling, something serious must have happened." I neither nodded nor shook my head. "No," I said calmly. "You don't need to do anything." Because immediately afterward, Hazel Locke's voice rang clearly through the phone. "Luke, my head is spinning so badly. I went to a bar and they forced me to drink so much alcohol. I'm really scared right now." I saw Luke Hayes' eyes instantly fill with worry. Sure enough, he spoke into the phone in a firm, decisive voice. "Don't be afraid. I'm coming right now." Luke hung up, then turned to look at me, as if trying to hold on to something. He began making promises, as though to prove that what he had just said was sincere. Each word carefully emphasized. "Chloe, don't worry. This will be the last time I help her. From today on, I'll make things clear to Hazel. I won't let her interfere between us anymore." I didn't look at him. I only lowered my head and stared at the diamond in the ring, as large as a pigeon's egg. Not far from the restaurant, an art performance began. The night sky lit up as clusters of fireworks burst open, glittering brilliantly in midair. Every couple in the restaurant smiled, their eyes shining under the romantic fireworks. Only I remained alone. Whether it was the proposal 5 years ago or this attempt at reconciliation after 5 years of separation, I was always the one left behind here, lonely and silent. A message came in. I unlocked my phone. The words that appeared were filled with Hazel's usual arrogance and provocation. "Chloe, in the end, he still chose me." Along with it was a short video. In the video, Luke Hayes stood in front of her, shielding her as he fought like a madman against the men who had been forcing her to drink. I suddenly remembered what Hazel had said to me when she left the dance troupe earlier that afternoon. "Tonight, he'll apologize to you. But don't worry, he'll still stand by me in the end, because he will always choose me." I had to admit that when Luke Hayes apologized to me earlier, my heart truly wavered. I once thought that if he could really change, then maybe I would let myself believe in him one last time. Unfortunately, he still couldn't do it. 2 days later, I went to handle the paperwork for my study abroad visa. After everything was settled, I brought the jade bracelet with me to the nursing home to visit Aunt Hall. I had been here several times before. On those occasions, she was never clear-headed and no longer recognized who I was. Fortunately, today she was somewhat lucid. As soon as she saw me, she called out, "My little Chloe." I told her everything that had happened recently and explained clearly why I had come. Aunt Hall gently stroked the jade bracelet in her hand. fell silent for a long time, then finally looked up, her eyes tinged with sorrow. When you were young, the two of you were always inseparable. Luke used to tell me all the time that he wanted to marry you. Later on, he even begged me to go discuss the marriage with your mother and set the engagement. I truly thought this love would eventually bear fruit. I never imagined that in the end, it would cause you to waste so many years. I'm sorry to you. Luke is also at fault. My eyes burned, the rims turning red, but I still shook my head. It was Luke Hayes who taught me what love is, Auntie, and it was also him who helped me realize that love is not something you can force. This is my choice. Aunt Hall quietly tore the old, yellowed wedding invitation to pieces, then returned the jade bracelet to me. Her eyes were full of tenderness, her voice trembling slightly. Chloe, I wish you a lifetime of happiness. Thank you, Auntie, I replied softly. About 2 weeks later, my visa was approved. I boarded a flight to Italy and began a brand new journey. The jade bracelet from those years ago still rested on my wrist. When the cabin door closed, I subconsciously raised my phone, wanting to capture the moment of the sunset outside the window. Just as I finished framing the shot, I suddenly saw a familiar figure, so familiar that I could hardly believe my eyes. Luke Hayes. The very next second, the flight attendant announced that the weather had changed and requested all passengers return to the waiting lounge temporarily. The entire cabin erupted into murmurs. Everyone looked outside and saw the sky was a clear, flawless blue without a single cloud, then began muttering complaints. The weather's like this, and they're saying we can't fly? Could there be some kind of mistake? I even timed this to go home and reunite with my wife. What rotten luck. I put my backpack back on and followed the flight attendant to return to the waiting lounge, where Luke Hayes was standing. The face that always carried an air of arrogance was now clearly filled with panic. He opened his arms and pulled me tightly into a hug, his voice hoarse. Why didn't you tell me you were going to Italy to study? I pushed him away, my gaze sweeping over the bewildered passengers watching nearby, my voice icy. You shouldn't have come here. Luke grabbed my hand and pressed something into my palm, the ring he hadn't had the chance to put on me that day. Chloe, I came to marry you. Can we go register our marriage right now? I looked at the ring in my hand, then at the regret-filled eyes of Luke Hayes in front of me. My heart was utterly calm, without a ripple. Luke Hayes, that day, I really almost agreed to you, I said quietly. But you couldn't do the things you promised with your own mouth. You couldn't even keep a complete apology. Once again, you abandoned me to run back to her. At that moment, my heart completely died. 10 years together, I gave you my entire youth, my most radiant years as a young woman. And in return, I got your mocking words, saying I'm already getting old now. Did you forget? When I was with you, I wasn't even 20 yet. Whether you were infatuated with youth or truly moved, no matter the reason, I've truly let go. After finishing, I placed the ring back into his hand and turned to leave. All this time, I was always the one standing there waiting for you. This time, let me leave first. An hour later, I returned to the cabin. Outside the window, the empty tarmac showed not a single figure. The man who had once been the darkest, boldest stroke in the story of my life finally disappeared into the vast sea of people. In first class, a few passengers looked at me with curious expressions, whispering, "Wow, a tycoon chasing love and getting turned down." I closed my eyes and paid them no mind. After landing, I took a deep breath of the unfamiliar air. A sense of freedom surged into my chest, sweet like a cool rain after a sweltering day. At that moment, my suitcase bumped lightly into a man, sending my belongings scattering everywhere. I apologized repeatedly, then offered to treat him to a meal to make up for it. At the restaurant, he introduced himself as Ethan Reed. He wore a black silk shirt, and every movement of his carried a calm, refined elegance. Before leaving, he even walked me all the way to the entrance of the apartment complex I had just rented. The advanced course in Italy was intense. I had to learn the language while keeping up with demanding dance training. In the midst of all that busyness, I was surprised to realize that I hadn't thought about Luke Hayes even once. The next time I saw him was on Christmas Eve. Christmas abroad was already close to Lunar New Year back home. My mom video called me, and Luke Hayes unexpectedly appeared on the screen. She said Luke had come to visit her and my dad on my behalf. I greeted him through the screen without saying anything more. Luke looked at me for a few seconds, then asked, "Have you been doing well lately?" I stayed silent for 2 seconds, then thought about the year that had just passed and smiled softly, nodding. "Very well." After hanging up, I took the groceries I had just bought and put them into the fridge. A knock sounded at the door. Ethan Reed stood outside, his hands full of shopping bags, his shoulders still damp with traces of early winter snow. He exhaled a puff of white breath and smiled gently. "Christmas abroad is basically New Year, right? Having a New Year's meal together wouldn't be too much, would it?" I stepped aside and opened the door for him. He naturally took off his shoes, carried the bags into the kitchen, and poured himself a glass of water, as if he had already become part of the rhythm of life there. If I had to name the most unexpected thing during my year in Italy, it would be Ethan Reed. That day, after we said goodbye downstairs, I happened to run into him again on my way to the dance troupe. Even more coincidentally, his place was only a few minutes' walk from mine. We gradually fell into the habit of eating together and walking home together. He taught me Italian, and I treated him to dinner. Over time, the two of us grew more and more familiar. Then one day, Ethan Reed confessed his feelings to me. It was in a small, simple cafe, completely different from the lavish Sunset restaurant from years ago. A singer softly sang love songs in German. A server appeared amid the flickering candlelight, holding balloons and a cake. Ethan knelt down on one knee and lifted a small box containing a necklace. Cheers and congratulations erupted all around us. His love was warm and radiant, open and without hesitation. He said it clearly, right in front of me. "Chloe, I like you. I want to marry you." My eyes nearly filled with tears. I accepted the balloons and ate the cake, but I did not accept the necklace. Ethan didn't understand. Even so, he persistently pursued me for more than a month. In the end, I calmly told him about the 10-year relationship between Luke Hayes and me. When the story ended, I said that he had built a solid career in Italy over many years, while I would return to my home country after graduation. I wouldn't stay for him, and he wouldn't give up everything here for me. Since it was a relationship with no future, it was better for us to just be friends. After that day, Ethan truly seemed to listen to me. He no longer chased after me relentlessly like before. Occasionally, he would knock on my door, smiling as he said, "Eating alone is too lonely. Let me cook with you." But on the day I returned home, I still didn't tell Ethan Reed in advance. Even so, to my surprise, I ran into him on the plane. He looked at me and smiled. "Maybe changing to a different place to live lets you see everything in a new light." The emotional string inside me, which had been quiet for so long, suddenly trembled into gentle waves. And even more unexpectedly, when I got off the plane, I saw Luke Hayes standing at the drop-off area. He walked toward me as if nothing had ever happened, gently reaching out to brush my temple like he used to. This time, however, his hand was stopped mid-air. Ethan Reed stepped forward, his tall figure shielding me, and said coldly, "What is this? Someone like you still has the nerve to come to the airport to pick up my girlfriend?" Luke Hayes' face darkened, disbelief written all over it. He clenched his teeth and stared at me. "Chloe, is what he said true?" In those brief seconds, his fist tightened as he waited for my answer. I stepped forward to stand in front of Ethan Reed and decisively replied, "Yes." Luke Hayes' eyes reddened, but he said nothing. He simply turned around and walked away. I watched his retreating figure and suddenly felt that time truly was something miraculous. Because at this moment, as I watched him leave, my heart was completely still, without the slightest ripple. A warm breath brushed against my neck, and a clear voice tinged with mild grievance sounded beside my ear. "The first time I claim my status, I have to borrow the mouth of your ex-boyfriend. Is he really that handsome? You couldn't even blink while looking at him." I widened my eyes and raised my hand to punch him lightly. I was just making an observation. The next day, I stood at the entrance of the dance troupe. Bright sunlight spread across a cloudless sky. My teacher and the junior students stood at the gate, welcoming me back with cheerful greetings. From afar, I turned toward the familiar backstage room. I saw the spot where Luke Hayes' photo frame had once been placed. It had now been replaced by a bouquet of fresh flowers. On the card was a bold, powerful handwriting. Ethan Reed's name was written on the card in bold, flowing handwriting. Everything unfolded smoothly. One of the junior girls saw it and immediately broke into a mischievous smile. "Oh? You just got back to the country and you already have a romance, senior sister?" I smiled and tucked the card into a drawer. "Just a friend I know from overseas." She covered her mouth, pretending to be shocked. "So he came back with you too?" I nodded, just as the gossip was heating up when someone walked in carrying a bouquet of red roses. "Senior sister Chloe, someone sent you flowers." I frowned, about to refuse, but the junior girl grabbed my arm and whispered excitedly, "Did you know? Hazel got fired last week after an accident on stage. That CEO Luke didn't show up to help her at all." I brushed her hand away, glanced at the roses and said flatly, "Throw them away." The delivery person left, the chatter abruptly stopped, and I changed clothes and focused on practice. In the late afternoon when I was leaving, I saw Luke Hayes standing beside the trash can at the entrance to the troupe, still fiddling with that bouquet of red roses. He stepped in front of me and stopped me, his voice gentle, tinged with caution. "Chloe, you're back in the country. Can we have a celebratory meal together?" I shook my head. "No need. My boyfriend is taking me." Luke seemed not to hear clearly and immediately grabbed my hand, refusing to let go. "Chloe, it's over between Hazel and me. During this time, I've truly reflected on myself. I regret everything. Can't you give me one more chance?" I flung his hand away, my voice filled with wariness. "I don't like you anymore. Don't pester me." The word pester struck Luke like a knife twisting into his heart. He stared at me, almost unable to believe it, and asked hoarsely, "Chloe, you're saying I'm pestering you?" I looked straight into his eyes, every word firm and forceful, like hammer blows. "Yes, you are pestering me, Luke Hayes. Over the past 2 years, I've still thought about you from time to time. Thought about the 10 years we were together. I kept asking myself why, during those last 5 years, when you were with Hazel, I still endured everything. Until one day, I found the answer. You come from a privileged background and have an arrogant nature. But I was the only person you were willing to lower your head to and apologize to when you were wrong. That so-called favoritism, especially toward me, made me think you truly loved me. But in the end, I realized that everything you did was because of her." Luke's expression gradually turned panicked, his eyes full of unease. I showed no mercy in tearing apart all his illusions, exposing the truths he had always tried to hide. "The one you truly favored was never me. It was always Hazel. You didn't dare admit that you loved someone else. You didn't dare admit that you'd changed your heart in love. You're too selfish, always thinking about your own feelings, while letting 2 women waste their youth and wear away their trust because of you. Let me guess, you didn't step in to help Hazel because you were afraid I might come back, and the dance troupe would make things difficult for her. Right?" Luke's face instantly turned deathly pale. I gave a cold laugh and added one last sentence like the final stab of a blade. "Oh right, the person who likes red roses isn't me, it's Hazel." With that, I turned around and walked away without looking back. Not far away, Ethan Reed stood under the streetlight, his whole figure radiating an unusual brightness. I walked over and linked my arm through his, sweeping away all lingering negativity with a smile. "Let's go." In the car, he fastened my seatbelt, handed me his phone, then returned to the driver's seat. "I'm not very familiar with places to eat around here yet. These are a few restaurants I found. Take a look and pick one." Ethan and I had very similar tastes. The places he'd taken me to eat in Italy had never disappointed me. On the screen was a list of 5 restaurants. I didn't need to look closely and pointed to the name at the top. "Sunset Restaurant. I've been there many times. The food is great." At the restaurant, I ordered with ease, choosing dishes I had eaten before and liked. I smiled at him and said, "All of these are really good. My first meal after coming home." "Good luck finding a job," I said lightly. The space was still as luxurious and refined as ever, the same violin music, the same soft lighting. The only difference was that 2 years ago, I had thought I would never come back here again. But this time I was no longer alone. Ethan Reed raised his glass and clinked it with mine. The chandelier light fell on his handsome, composed face, making him even more captivating. He smiled faintly. I said we're celebrating tonight, didn't I? His gaze softened, carrying a trace of seriousness. Chloe, my parents are coming back to the country next week. Would you be willing to meet them with me? I smiled and nodded gently. Okay. After that, once everything was clearly settled with Luke Hayes, I blocked all of his contact methods, but by the weekend he still called me from an unfamiliar number. My mother is sick, he said. When she's delirious, she keeps calling your name. Could you come see her for a bit? I felt a pang of sympathy, but I didn't agree, only giving a vague response. After hanging up, I immediately took a car to the nursing home. Aunt Hall's condition had indeed worsened. Perhaps because of her age, she no longer recognized who I was. I took off the jade bracelet and placed it in her hand, saying softly, I'm Chloe. I've come to see you, Auntie. Though confused, Aunt Hall still recognized the bracelet. She gripped my hand tightly and kept speaking in disjointed, rambling sentences. Luke Hayes walked in and saw me there. Joy flashed across his eyes, impossible to hide. I stayed until evening, until Aunt Hall finally fell asleep. Then I received a message from Ethan Reed. I'm coming to pick you up. I stood up and walked out quickly, completely ignoring Luke's gaze. He stopped me at the door and handed me the jade bracelet I had left behind. Only then did I remember that when I was coaxing Aunt Hall to sleep, I had left it in her hand. I took it and said a simple thank you. Luke stepped closer, pain flickering in his eyes. Chloe, you still keep the jade bracelet from our engagement. Then why can't you forgive me? Another message from Ethan appeared on my phone. I'm here. I'm at the gate. I frowned slightly, irritation clear in my eyes. Even now, Luke was still clinging on. How pointless. I thought that saying that would make him back off, but instead, he took another step closer. His eyes were bloodshot as he stared at me. I don't believe it. If you've truly forgotten me, why are you still keeping the bracelet? You're just angry with me, aren't you? Without hesitation, I swung my hand and slapped him hard across the face, then shoved him away. In Luke Hayes' eyes, countless emotions flashed and intertwined. Hurt, shock, unease, regret. I saw them all, yet remained cold. Do you know why I keep the bracelet? I enunciated every word clearly. It's not because of you. I'll say it one more time, Luke Hayes. We ended a long time ago. Do you hear me clearly? His pupils shrank, yet his gaze drifted away from me. Before I could react, he suddenly lunged forward and shouted, Watch out. I instinctively turned my head, eyes widening. A woman from a nearby room rushed out and violently shoved me down the stairs. I didn't have time to dodge, only to shut my eyes by instinct. In the instant my body lost balance in midair, someone wrapped me tightly in their arms. The embrace was firm, almost crushing, yet familiar, carrying a faint, fresh scent of grass and trees. I opened my eyes to see Luke Hayes lying beneath me, still holding me, his leg badly injured. The entire nursing home fell into chaos. Nurses hurriedly called emergency services. Patients and family members panicked. I couldn't say a word, only felt a suffocating tightness rise in my throat. At the hospital, I stood by Luke Hayes' bed, my expression cold. He lay there, his lips pale, yet he still forced a smile. Don't be angry. I just didn't want you to get hurt. The tightness in my throat grew worse. I took a deep breath and said bluntly, Thank you for saving me. I'll cover all of your medical expenses, and I'll hire someone to take care of you. He was silent for a moment, his hand touching his bandaged leg, then he looked at me with a pitiful expression. Can you stay and take care of me? I shook my head without hesitation and turned to leave. Out in the hallway, Ethan Reed was leaning against the wall, idly playing with a button between his fingers. When he saw me come out, he tilted his head and teased me slowly. I thought you might soften up and agree. I didn't say anything, my expression still cold as I walked quickly forward. He followed me, smiling and shaking his head. From the nursing home all the way to the hospital, and I didn't even get wildly jealous. I'm really too magnanimous, aren't I? Then he pulled a chocolate bar out of his pocket and pressed it into my hand. I always respect your matters. The thinking is yours. The way it's handled is mine. Even if you had really chosen to go back to him today, I would still respect that. I pursed my lips in mock grievance. What if he pretends to be pitiful and uses this as an excuse to hold on to me? Ethan laughed softly. That won't happen. You wouldn't go back. Slightly surprised, I turned to look at him from the passenger seat. He held the steering wheel steadily, his defined knuckles tracing a smooth curve as he turned. If you weren't firm enough, I would have succeeded in pursuing you back in Italy. Why would I need to chase you all the way back here, and even wait outside the hospital? I laughed, as if sunlight had poured straight into my heart. So it turned out that having someone who trusted me this much, who understood me this well, was also a kind of blessing. Luke Hayes saving me was a debt of gratitude. His hesitation and indecision in love were a kind of karmic trial. At first I had hated him and blamed him. This time, he saved me. Consider it that we were even. Ethan placed his free hand over my fingers, slowly stroking my fingertips. His voice was gentle, carrying a steady, reassuring warmth. Don't forget, this weekend, you still have to meet my parents. I nodded lightly, my heart brimming with joy. That weekend, just as I stepped out of the house, a nurse called me, her voice full of worry. Miss Chen, Mr. Hall has a very high fever. He's not eating or drinking anything. No matter how much we try to persuade him, he won't listen. I frowned, stayed silent for 2 seconds, then replied calmly. Then call a doctor. You can't let him die in the hospital. Ethan burst out laughing right then, making me shoot him a glare before hanging up. Not long after, we arrived in front of a villa, its architecture refined, quiet, and luxurious. I stared blankly at the palace-like building before me, frozen in place for several seconds. He had never told me his family was this wealthy. He paused for a moment, then laughed. I thought you already knew. My last name is Reed. Only then did it dawn on me, the wealthiest family in this city was also the Reed family. Carrying a hint of nervousness, I stepped into his home. But the moment I saw his mother, all the tension inside me instantly melted away. She was simple and warm, striking up a conversation the moment she saw me. A warm jade bracelet, smooth and fine, precious and gentle, was placed into my hand. There's nothing particularly valuable at home. Just keep this. When it comes time for the engagement, I'll prepare something even better for you. That meal was one I ate happily, my heart light and at ease. The only thing that made me uncomfortable was that when I went to the restroom, I received another message from Luke Hayes' nurse, saying he wanted to see me one last time. Worried he might be trying to pull something again, I wasn't entirely at ease, but I still agreed. After dinner, I asked Ethan to drive me to the hospital. Before getting out of the car, he grabbed my hand and pulled me into his arms. He held me so tightly it was as if he didn't want to let go, then lowered his head and kissed me, kissing me for a long time, until his lips turned red and dry before he finally stopped. His voice was low and hoarse, unmistakably anxious. Don't promise him anything. I could sense the unease in every breath he took. I smiled and kissed him lightly on the lips. I won't. I sat down beside Luke Hayes' hospital bed. I sat quietly by the bed, waiting for him to speak first. He said nothing, only stared at me as tears slid down his face. I remained silent, waiting until he finished crying. Perhaps he cried until he was exhausted. Luke Hayes' eyes were red as he asked hoarsely, Is there really no possibility left between us? I regret it, Chloe. I truly regret it. Lately I've thought about it a lot. The person I've always loved is you. Hazel was just a moment of impulsiveness. I cut him off coldly. I don't want to hear those meaningless words. I have a boyfriend now. Our relationship is stable, and we're about to get married. You said this would be the last time we met, so I came. If there's anything you want to say it all at once. After that, let it go. The words let it go landed heavily, like a blade driven straight into his chest. Luke Hayes looked at me, pain clearly written in his eyes, and said chokingly, I don't believe it. You're still keeping the jade bracelet from our engagement. I sighed, took off the bracelet, and held it in my hand, looking at it for a long time. His gaze clung to me, full of hope. I took a deep breath, then hurled the bracelet hard onto the floor. Crack, it shattered into pieces. Luke Hayes shouted, Are you crazy? I looked at him calmly. If that bracelet makes you think this love still has hope, then I'd rather smash it myself. I continued evenly. Luke Hayes, I won't forget you, but I hope from now on you won't bother me anymore. You've already made me waste 10 years. Please let me live the rest of my life in peace. I stood up and walked out of the hospital room. Behind me, his voice howled in near madness. Chloe, you're mine. On what grounds do I have to let you go? I didn't turn back. My hand gripped the door handle, and I closed it decisively. Right outside the room stood someone who shocked me. Hazel Locke. We sat down at the cafe across from the hospital. Hazel looked haggard, both hands gripping her coffee cup, her head lowered as she gave a bitter smile. It's ridiculous, isn't it? I stayed with Luke Hayes for those last 5 years and ended up with nothing. Chloe, tell me, did I bring this on myself? I didn't answer, only looked out the window. A couple was walking their dog outside, laughing and joking together. I smiled slightly and said, "Tell me, if they broke up, would they keep the dog together or split it?" Hazel's face instantly darkened, thinking I was implying something. I didn't explain. I took a small sip of coffee and asked, "Have you been doing okay lately?" She forced a bitter smile. "Not really. To be precise, it's been terrible. Before, Luke always protected me. I thought I truly had talent, a gift for dance. But once he stopped standing on my side, I realized I'm not even good enough to be a dance instructor." The couple outside had already left. All that remained was Ethan Reed's car parked quietly by the curb, steady and unmoving. I finished my coffee, looked straight at Hazel, and said, "You're still young. Being dazzled by an older man with status and good looks, I don't blame you for that. But if you're clear-headed from now on, then live properly." Hazel looked at me, her eyes reddened. I stood up without saying anything more and left the cafe. I opened the car door and got in. The person inside was still the one who always waited for me. I didn't need to look back. Who said that leaving Luke Hayes meant you wouldn't meet someone better? Life, starting over, is never too late. A month later, I heard that Luke Hayes' company stock had plummeted disastrously. The reason was that Hazel had compiled everything that had happened between her and Luke into a presentation and posted it publicly online. At that time, Luke Hayes was still hospitalized, recovering from his injuries. His company was seized by others who took advantage of the situation. As for Hazel, she returned to the orphanage where she had grown up, taking a job there as a regular staff member. What happened after that no longer concerned me, because I was about to get married. At Sunset Restaurant, a place I had been to countless times before, Ethan Reed knelt down on one knee in front of everyone and asked clearly, "Chloe, will you marry me?" I threw myself into his arms and answered every word with certainty. "I do." That very restaurant, which had once witnessed my lonely tears years ago, now truly saw me happy. 1 week later, Ethan Reed's and my wedding was held. It was grand, breathtakingly beautiful, and even made the financial news. The media called it the wedding of the century. But to me, everything could be summed up in a single sentence. When someone truly wants to marry you, they won't even want to wait one more minute. How does it feel to realize you were never someone's priority, only their option? Love and Lies story.